Go to the right spots to further awareness and education.
Residential schools. A 12-year-old boy raises $50,000. Now his family's figuring out the best way to spend it.
My first reaction when I heard that, we've been praying for this.
As U.S. tourists get ready to come to Canada, Indigenous tourism operators hope for their business. Good evening and welcome to APTN National News. I'm Daryl Stranger. Last month, a 12-year-old boy walked over 200 kilometers across Nova Scotia to raise awareness about residential schools. Now he's reaching out for help to decide on how to distribute the donations and carry on the campaign. Angel Moore brings us this story.
Landon's Journey of Awareness is hosting barbecues in Mi'kmaq communities, asking youth how to spend some money.
They should get new houses on the community.
That's awesome. What else?
Maybe they should make a vaccine center.
Last month, Landon Tony ended his walk with almost $50,000 raised. Marcia McClellan, Landon's mom, says,
We were kind of put in a position where we were stuck. We wanted to, we have money raised and we wanted to go to the right spots to further awareness and education.
McClellan says hundreds of people have reached out with suggestions, so they developed a survey to collect responses and determine how the donations should be spent.
We want to hear from everybody, Indigenous and non-Indigenous, so to get an idea of where we're lacking as a whole. So the surveys are basically going to give us meaningful data to really steer us in the right direction.
Chief Sidney Peters of Glooscap First Nation welcomed Landon.
One of the things that Landon has done through his walk and with his family has brought a lot of our First Nations together, not only First Nations but the non-natives as well, and I think that was important, and that was something that we really needed as a nation and for people to understand.
McClellan helps the youth fill out the survey. Topics include access to elders, knowledge keepers, and community needs. The survey will target different age groups and communities. That will take over 2 months to complete. Tony says he is tired and will take a few days off.
My mainly runs the surveys and stuff. She helps me out with that as I'm doing kids stuff with my friends. And
more community events are planned, such as a fundraising golf tournament. McClellan says the journey has been a success.
You observe the survivors during the walk or some events that we put on, and they're shining. That's helping them heal, in my opinion.
A walk is planned for next summer. It will be almost 400 kilometers to communities in Cape Breton, Nova Scotia. Angel Moore, APTN National News, Glooscap First Nation.
It was called the March for Truth and Justice in Ottawa on Saturday to shine a light on crimes committed against children who went to residential school.
No justice, no peace.
Okay, About 200 people gathered on Parliament Hill. They marched to the Prime Minister's office and then down the street to the Department of Justice to keep the pressure on the federal government. The event was co-sponsored by 2 NDP members of Parliament, Charlie Angus and Mumila Kakak. They want Justice Minister David Lametti to appoint a special independent prosecutor who would treat the recent discoveries of unmarked graves across Canada as crime scenes.
You are not talking about a tragedy. You are talking about a policy to destroy a people, and that meets the test of a crime against humanity, and it needs to be investigated.
The Prime Minister and federal government has the power to ensure these national crimes against humanity can be looked into
In northern Alberta, the Athabasca Chippewa First Nation is calling on the federal government to apologize for the displacement of its people during the creation of Wood Buffalo National Park. This follows the publication of a report that contains stories from elders. It highlights treaty violations committed by the Canadian government. Leslie Wilson says he is a descendant of families who were removed from the park for the preservation of wood bison. He says Canada needs to own up to its wrongdoings.
When those bison crossed the Peace River and the park boundary was expanded, the Athabasca Chippewa were forced to leave without any consultation. We want to see, first of all, an apology. You know, let's see them admit that yes, this was done and it was done wrong to the people of to the Chippewa people, and then. From there on, let's move on to reconciliation.
We will have more on the history of wood buffalo and the displacement soon. We want to hear what you think about the report released on Wood Buffalo National Park. Here's how to continue the conversation. Send your emails to news@aptn.ca or leave a comment on aptnnews.ca. You can also find us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and now TikTok. Follow APTN News to join the conversation and see our latest stories. The Canadian government has dropped its appeal of a court decision ordering a Northwest Territories First Nation to hold its election. But the move has implications that reach well beyond the small Dene community. Brett Forrester, the new host of APTN's Nation to Nation, has the scoop on this. Here he is now with Dennis Ward to explain.
Brett, thanks for being with us. Can you bring us up to speed on this case?
Certainly. Earlier this year, Floyd Bertrand won a federal court case that he launched against his First Nation. Now, his First Nation had used temporary regulations that Ottawa had drawn up in April 2020 at the height of the first wave of the COVID-19 pandemic. These regulations authorize band councils to postpone or cancel their elections for 6 months, with the option to renew for another 6 months. At the time, there was concern that First Nations would have to hold their elections amid spiking case counts in a raging global pandemic. The problem was that Floyd's First Nation, the Acho-Deneko First Nation, isn't under the Indian Act. It has a custom election code that doesn't allow for postponement. So when it went to court, the judge not only ordered the First Nation to hold its election, it declared that part of the regulations to be invalid. The feds appealed that decision, but earlier this week they abruptly withdrew that appeal.
What was the reaction from all the others involved in this case?
Well, you'd think it would be happiness, but in fact Bertrand and his lawyers were somewhat shocked and rather disappointed. Indigenous Services Canada said they dropped the appeal because they had passed a clause in the Budget Implementation Act which retroactively validated the regulations and any decisions made under them, so they effectively overrode the federal court by putting these regulations into law. Well, Bertrand planned on challenging that line in the Budget Act. He filed a document alleging it was unconstitutional because it violates the sovereignty of self-governing First Nations. And 2 days later, the federal government withdrew that appeal, leaving them somewhat surprised.
Sounds like there's still some outstanding issues then. So what happens next here?
Well, when you drop an appeal, it does technically count as a win. So Floyd Bertrand did in fact win this case, but a third party who intervened in this suit, known as the Band Members Alliance and Advocacy Association of Canada, a relatively new national legal organization, said it's mulling whether or not to launch a new constitutional challenge altogether against this particular line in the Budget Act. BMAC, as it's called, President Rob Louie told me that this case raises significant legal issues that run much deeper than temporary pandemic regulations. How much power can Ottawa exercise over internal electoral matters of First Nations? Can the feds really just snap their fingers and create these new rules that allow chiefs and councils to unilaterally extend their own terms? How much right do band members have to seek review, transparency and accountability for elections they might question? These were all concerns that Louis said they were hoping to get judicial judicial clarity on in this case. Now that the appeal's been dropped, that's not going to happen.
Brett, we'll have to leave it there, but appreciate you taking some time for us, and congrats again on the new gig as the host of Nation to Nation.
Thanks, Dennis. We'll see you next season.
If you want to read more on this story, you can go online to aptnnews.ca. The Cree of Iu-Ischii in northwestern Quebec have elected a new Grand Chief. Mandy Gull-Masty is the first woman to occupy the role. Works after learning the results. Gull-Masty won the election with 64% of the vote in the second runoff. Previously, Gull-Masty served as the Deputy Grand Chief for the last 4 years. She emphasized striking a balance between resource development and land protection during her campaign.
We are practicing the Cree way of life. People still hunt, fish, and trap. I'm very proud of that our culture is in place, and I feel that it is very strong. But I do think that we really have to look at the territory and see where we want to take it and what that means in defining the future of the Cree.
We have to take a short break, but still ahead, how the Yukon Territory is preparing to welcome travelers from the United States.
We're very excited for the border to open, especially before our big fall polar bear season, where we get a majority of our business.
Welcome back. Since Canada tightened its borders to international travelers last March, Indigenous tourism has come to a standstill, and many operators are struggling to hold on to their businesses. But as Sarah Connors tells us, a recent border announcement is bringing much needed relief.
Hey! This video from 2019 shows tour operator David Daly taking tourists on a mushing adventure in Churchill, Manitoba. Daly is Métis and the owner of Wapaska Ventures, a dog-sled tour company. Before the pandemic, he could see as many as 2,000 tourists a year, most from the U.S., but not anymore.
October-November season for dog sledding, we did probably 3 to 5% of what we normally do. And this is the second summer that we've lost.
Last year, Canada tightened its borders to international travelers, requiring a mandatory 2-week self-isolation period for most non-essential visitors. But last week, the federal government announced it will allow fully vaccinated American travelers into the country on August 9th, provided they can show proof of vaccination.
My first reaction when I heard that, we've been praying for this.
Tina Dixon is Chippewan and the co-owner of several tour companies, including an outfitting company in the Yukon. Since the pandemic hit, she's been struggling to stay afloat.
When it comes to outfitting, as that is 95% of our clients are U.S., so we're very happy with the recent border announcement.
Carcass, Southern Lakes.
While Dixon is optimistic about the reopening, she's realistic tourism will most likely be slow until winter.
It's literally a recovery. Yeah, and it's not going to happen overnight.
COVID, it's had quite a devastating impact to our industry.
Keith Henry is the president of the Indigenous Tourism Association of Canada. He estimates border closures have caused a loss of $1 billion in direct GDP to the industry, and employment is down by 22,000 jobs.
When the international markets closed, we lost all those paying customers overnight.
He says the U.S. is Indigenous tourism's second highest paying customer, and the association is already working on marketing strategies.
So seeing that border reopen is going to be a huge potential support for our businesses.
If the COVID situation remains favorable in the coming weeks, international travelers will be able to visit on September 7th, just in time for the fall season.
We're very excited for the border to open, especially before our big fall polar bear season, where we get a majority of our business.
Meanwhile, Dixon says tourism that's mindful of COVID and communities will be the new way forward.
We need to get on with business, and we can do it. It's something that we have to live with. But from a tourism perspective, it's educating our visitor, it's controlling, it's managing our visitor, and walking very lightly and respectfully on our land.
Sarah Connors, APTN National News, Whitehorse.
Starting this Wednesday, the Yukon government plans to ease many COVID restrictions, including the use of masks and self-isolation requirements. But some First Nations expressed concern about the lack of consultation about the plan. The chief of Champagne and Ajax First Nation says he was taken aback by the government's approach, but is now feeling more confident because of support measures that will be in place in case of more outbreaks.
We're a little bit better place, given that we have been able to share our concerns, and there are a number of areas that when it was first announced, the information just was fully shared with us. So now that we have a little bit better idea of how this is going to go ahead, from a Champagne Ajax perspective, I think we can be able to manage it.
A new study has found the hidden and heartbreaking impact on children from the pandemic. The study by The Lancet found that over 1 million children have lost a primary caregiver to COVID-19. The study found that psychological and economic support can help these families with children who've lost a caregiver. More COVID-19 restrictions have been lifted in Quebec, including long-anticipated operating extensions for bars and restaurants. They are now permitted to serve alcohol until 1 a.m. with closing time pushed to 2 a.m. and bigger crowds are allowed at indoor and outdoor events. The province is still maintaining mandatory masks and social distancing in enclosed public spaces and transit. Quebec decided to go ahead with lifting the restrictions despite Canada's top doctors warning of a fourth wave of COVID-19. And another air quality warning has been issued for Metro Vancouver and the Fraser Valley as wildfire smoke arrives from the BC interior. High concentrations of fine particulate matter are expected over the next few days. Exposure to them can cause problems for people with underlying conditions such as lung disease, heart disease, asthma, and diabetes. Officials recommend staying indoors and reducing outdoor activity until the advisory is lifted. Serious drought conditions in BC are hurting farmers who are struggling to produce quality crops.
Berry is getting a little bit softer. Also, it's getting not that heavy. It's not getting that juicy.
It may have rained for a short stretch Saturday, but the farmers will need much more than they got to salvage their fast-dying crops. In addition to the lack of rain, sales are down as well. The province has now gone 46 days with no measurable rain. The good news is a multi-day stretch of rain is expected to hit Metro Vancouver and the Fraser Valley later this week. In Saskatchewan, there are currently 126 wildfires burning. 111 are contained, 17 are not contained, but are not expected to grow. Crews are working to contain fires around Grandmother's Bay, Smeaton, and north of Hudson Bay. Last week, evacuees from some communities started returning home. Members of Shoal Lake and Buffalo Narrows returned home a few weeks ago. Saskatchewan has had 511 fires so far this year. Based on the last 5 years, that's more than double the usual yearly average of 242. All right, we have to take one final break, but still to come, our photo of the day is next. Stay with us. Welcome back. It's time now for our photo of the day. Greg Scriver continues to send us some great photos. This was near Ottawa, Ontario, as the haze and smoke from nearby fires helped create an orange reflection in the sky over the Ottawa River. For the chance to be our next photo of the day, be sure to send us your photos to share@aptn.ca and include details along with your photo. Now let's take a look at tomorrow's weather forecast. 24 and sunshine in Charlottetown and 26 in Fredericton. 16 and rain in Nain and 21 in Cartwright. 25 and a mix of sun and cloud in Quebec City and 27 and sun in Montreal. 27 and rain in Toronto, and 24 and rain in North Bay. 20 degrees and rain in Timmins, and 26 and sun in Big Trout Lake. 30 and sunshine in God's Lake, and 31 and sun in Norway House. 32 and sunshine in Winnipeg, and 31 in Brandon. 31 and cloudy in Regina, and 30 and rain in Saskatoon. 27 and rain in La Ronge, and 31 and rain in Stony Rapids. Over in the west, 27 and rain in Fort Chipewyan, and 28 in Peace River. 27 and rain in Edmonton, and 33 in Medicine Hat. 25 in a mix of sun and cloud in Vancouver, and 29 in a mix of sun and cloud in Quesnel. 22 in a mix of sun and cloud in Dease Lake, and 27 in Prince George. 23 degrees in Watson Lake, and 28 in Dawson. 22 and rain in Yellowknife, and 19 and rain in Wrigley. 14 and rain in Fort McPherson, and 17 and rain in Colville Lake. 12 degrees and raining in Baker Lake, and 13 in Chesterfield. 3 degrees in a mix of sun and cloud in Resolute, and 6 in Arctic Bay. For the first time at this year's Games in Tokyo, fans are flocking to a venue to watch the world's best compete. After a week of spectatorless events, fans arrived at the Izu Velodrome to watch the action. 50% capacity is allowed at the 1,800-seat cycling venue. Today is the first of 7 days of action at the cycling track. While these are the first ticketed fans to attend an event, spectators have lined the streets for cycling road races the last week. And there are a couple new adorable residents at a zoo in France, and there's no doubt zoogoers will flock to see them as soon as they can. Meet 2 new baby cubs at the Bouval Park Zoo. Juan, the giant panda, gave birth on Saturday shortly after 1 a.m. The twins are her second and third cubs after the first panda ever born in France in 2017. Wow. Those baby cubs are adorable, and it's amazing how tiny they are at birth. Well, that's going to do it for this Monday edition of APTN National News. For news anytime, you can visit our website at aptnnews.ca. Thank you for joining us. I'm Daryl Stranger. Have a great night.